Good morning. So it's beautiful, sunny here today. Southern Ontario. Looks like a cold one though, so bundle up. Yesterday was World Watercolor Day, and if you missed it, maybe check out the Canadian Society of Painters in Watercolor Facebook page. I believe they also have a YouTube channel, and I did a demo for them last night. So check that out, and check out all the other great demos that they offered for free to celebrate World Watercolor Day. So in the wake of that, we are forging on towards Christmas, and I thought, well, let's start heading towards something that's a little more Christmassy and wintry, and so I thought I would do some birch trees. So let me just switch over here to my demo. And we've got these are some birch trees that I took, and let me just talk about them for one quick second and tell you what it was that I loved about this particular picture. And in this case, it happened to be the lighting. Now, the lighting's really important when you are painting anything cylindrical, because if I draw a cylinder, it's just a line drawing. If I've got the light right on it, it might have a little shading on the sides. But in this case, like this one right here, I made sure that I had lighting on one side. So I actually am kind of on the shadow side of the tree, and that actually does make a big difference. So if I were to sort of do another cylinder, and I've got light coming from this side, I'm going to leave that quite light. And I will shade this side. And then I'm going to have a little, probably a lot of reflected light, particularly in a scene like this where you have snow, because it reflects a lot of light. The white does. So there'll be bounce back light here, all right? A little bit of bounce back light. So that means that this middle section is what they call a core shadow. So this is going to be the darkest part. All right. So we create the look of a cylinder using the various values in here. And this is one thing that I find that a lot of people sort of leave out when they're doing their birch trees. Their head says it's white, and they leave it white, and then they start painting. So, good morning, New Jersey. Oh, nice. Hi, Karen, Jan, lots of Jans this morning. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining. All right, so I'm going to work small here, because guess what? Birch trees make great cards. So I'm just going to start. I'm not even going to use this reference in particular. I'm going to put some birch trees in here, and so in order to demonstrate them, I'm going to make them a little bit larger, like a little bit wider, because you'll be able to see more closely what it is I'm doing. So I'll put a pear there, and maybe there'll be a little bit of a hill or something here. Something like that, maybe some background back here. Okay, so I've just basically got a very, very simple drawing. Morning, Debbie. Hi, Dorothy. Hi, Irina. Catherine. Oh. No walking group. Yes, it's a little chilly today. Hi, Melody. All right, so I am going to choose, I'm going to use This is Arch's 140-pound cold press paper that I'm using. I'm going to be using mainly Da Vinci watercolors, but I have a couple of Winsor Newtons in there. The brush I'm going to be using is a number 10 squirrel hair brush, and it holds lots and has a nice point, so that's what I'm going to be using. I've got 2 water buckets and I've got some paper towel for blotting. So, mouse out of the way. So I'm going to start off with what I was just talking about, and that is the creating the shadow on the tree. So I'm going to have a light source coming from this side. Oh, good evening, Alfred. Oh, nice of you to join me. Okay, so if I have low light at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, chances are that light's going to be warm. You know, as the sun rises, it's kind of red or orange or yellow, and then as it gets higher in the sky, it's more white. So that's a little cooler. And then at the end of the day, once again, it gets more golden, more orange, or more red. So if the light is low, there's a pretty good chance that light is warm. So I am going to start off with warm highlights, cool shadows. So I'm already thinking color temperature here. So I'm going to grab some blue. I think maybe I'll use some cobalt blue here. Mix it in with some of my stuff that I already have on my palette. Just mix it all in there. And I'm going to create a cool shadow on the side of these trees. Now, it's going to feel like it's going to be like super dark because everything on the paper right now is so white. And when everything on the paper is white, anything you put on looks dark. But you have to remember your paint's going to dry about 20% lighter, and you don't have any of the darks on yet. So I'm going to start off with a blue tree. Haha, blue tree. All right, so I'm going to take some, maybe some burnt sienna. Okay, I'll take some burnt sienna, mix it in a little bit to that blue, which makes it a little bit gray. And I'm going to start coming down that core shadow area with that color. So now the problem I don't like about this is that I have a hard line. So I'm going to rinse my brush and blot it on some paper towel. Let me grab some paper towel. And I'm going to run my brush just down this edge to soften it up a bit. So I'm just sort of tracing that edge. Okay, I don't want to pull any of the color in or anything like that. All right. So I have something that already looks a little bit cylindrical. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other tree. Cobalt blue. I guess I could use a little more color than that. And a little bit of burnt sienna. Okay, let's get that core shadow in there. The core shadow is the darkest part that you're going to see on, like the darkest shadow on a sphere or a cylinder or anything like that. So rinse and blot. Let's get that a little cleaner. And just trace along that edge while it's wet, okay? I'm going to go twice, make it a little softer. All right, so I still have white paper at the edge of my birch tree, right? And you're probably looking at this and going, but I don't see that blue in this picture here, which is fine. I'm just defining whether or not something's cool or warm at this point. Hi, Isabel. Okay, so how do I make this part of the tree show up? Well, if you want white to show up on something, you put it against something dark. So I am going to come in and I'm going to create some background here. So I will take this part here and I'm going to wet it. And you can see I'm really not following my photo at all. I'm just using it as a guideline as to, you know, the texture on the bark and things like that when I get to that part. I'm really kind of creating my own design. All right, so I'm going to wet that. I'm going to wet the section between these trees. Except for the white on the tree itself. I don't want to get that wet. Okay, so I'm going to say, I'm going to put a sky in here. So I'm going to use a little maybe cerulean blue, maybe a little cobalt with that. And I'm going to put in some sky. So I'm just painting around some areas where there'll be some white for the sky. And that's, or white for the clouds, I should say. And that'll give me my sky. Pretty basic stuff, but don't want to make a blossom there. Okay. I'm trying to get the idea that the blue comes through and continues on the other side of this tree, right? I want the background to look continuous. Maybe a little more blue up at the top. The sky's always a little bluer above your head and gets lighter towards the horizon, so I'm going to come down here and get a little bit lighter as I come down. Okay, but this is still wet, and what I want to do, just want to make sure it's still wet, is I'm going to come in with, I've got some, this is a little left over from my demo last night. This is burnt sienna mixed with a little bit of Payne's gray. So it's given me a real nice brown color here, but I want to go a little bit more burnt sienna, I think. And mix that in. And right along this line here, I'm going to drop in and I'm letting it spread, is some dark color here. And when it spreads, it's going to look like trees. Pretty awesome. All right, so it's kind of reaching up to the sky. Now right in here, it's a tight spot, so I have to get up on the tiptoe of my brush, but right, and I come along here, and again I'm going to just touch in. I want it to spread a little bit more. It seems to have a couple of dry spots, so I just rinsed and blotted my brush, and I'm just going to tickle the top edge of this. I want the top edge of this fuzzy because I want it to look far away. I want it to look like it's going off into the distance. All right, so I can come in and Maybe put a little more dark at the bottom. Like that. Hi Margot. Hi Anne. All right, so I'm just coming along here. I want to make sure this side of the tree is looking pretty tidy. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to do there. All right. So there's a couple of things I can do with this background. I can use this little tool. This is called a stylus, and I can actually sort of scrape into this and get the look of some distant tree trunks. Now, being winter, if I'm making this a winter scene, I can show the entire tree skeleton because there's no foliage in front of these trees to make it look like they have leaves on them, right? So I can do that. I can also grab a palette knife. 1 second. And I can scrape out a few birch trees too. So I'm kind of taking my palette knife like this, pushing it with my thumb. You can use a credit card or something like that for this as well. And when this paint gets just to that sort of sticky stage, I can scrape the paint off of the surface. Right. These trees will be clustered. They won't be all evenly spaced or anything, but I can just scrape a little bit in there along here. That's my distant trees. I don't have to do any more to that. I could actually bring a couple of them forward. I could bring a tree trunk down once in a while, and that's fine too. Just and that gives you that idea that the trees are starting to come forward, and that's kind of nicer than having just one static line running right across. And all right, so my birch tree is getting pretty dry now, and you can see how much it's lightened up since it dried, right? And what I'm going to do over here on my palette is I'm going to make a clean spot here. I'll keep some of this. I might use it again. But I want a clean spot so that I can create some other colors there. But I'm going to finish up a little bit of my ground here. So I've got some nice blues that I was using for the birch tree, and I'm going to use a little bit of cerulean with this as well, because the thing about snow is it's usually going to reflect whatever the sky has in it. Oh, hi Rose. Nice to see you. All right, so I am going to dilute this quite a bit. I don't want a lot of dark in my snow because the plane of the snow is flat. It's facing directly towards the sky. Therefore, it has a lot of light in it. So I don't want to make my shadows too dark just yet. It would be very dark if there was a solid object creating a shadow, or if there was, if there was a real dip in the snow and the plane of the snow goes from, level to, 45 degrees or something like that, then you'd have a darker shadow. So the lighter the shadow, the more upward facing it's going to seem. And I am going to just sort of test out my color here. I'm going to put some shadow right behind the mound where the birch trees are, so I'll put this in here. let that taper off. Now I don't want a hard line, so what I'm going to do, actually I do want a hard line. I want this one to be hard, I want the top one to be soft. So I'm rinsing and blotting my brush, and I'm going to run this brush along that upper edge. It's blotted it a little too much. So make sure when you put your paint down that it's not too dry, or you won't be able to soften your edge very easily. All right, so there we go. All right, another dark shadow is going to be, of course, the birch tree. Let's get a little bit of that blue mixed up again. Got a little bit of burnt sienna in there just to take the intensity out of it. Otherwise, it's just way too blue. Now, the light's coming from here, therefore the shadow's going to go in the other direction. So I'm going to take this and just go straight away from the birch tree. All right, now real close to the birch tree, it could get quite dark. So I'm going to drop in, while this is wet, I'm going to drop in a little bit more dark color in here. So I've taken a little bit of that brown mixture, mixed it with my blue, and I'm just dropping it right up against the birch tree to give that a stronger shadow right close to the birch. Like I said, a solid object is going to make a darker shadow than a rounded mound of snow, for example. Okay, so I'm just going to let that sort of blend. All right, and I'm going to come back to some of this cleaner blue, and I'm going to put a little bit more in here. These trees here will cast shadows, so I'm going to put some long, thin lines to the right of all of these trees here. And I may put a few other little mounds and things in the snow, you know, kind of like what you see here. There's all these sort of mounds and then another mound and so on. So this isn't level terrain. So I'll put a shadow in, and then we'll soften the top edge. All right, and in the foreground, well, we're looking directly at the snow, so we're probably going to have a little bit in here, but I'm just going to sort of dry brush in a little bit of, or lightly paint in a little bit of the texture of the snow in the foreground. Okay, so I think, you know, I've pretty much established my snow there. I may end up adding a few other little branches and things like that, in which case I'll be adding some more cast shadows. But for now, I think I can come back to my birch tree, which is dry, and I can start creating some of the bands on the birch tree. Now, one thing I see very frequently, which kind of looks a little bit odd, is people will take and they'll go directly in a straight line right across the tree, all the way from bottom to top. But if you want to create a little bit of perspective in a tree that's close to you, the way this one is, take a close look at this example here. There's the bottom part is a little bit rounded, like a smile, right? Then it starts getting to your eye level, and then it goes pretty straight. And then above your eye level, it starts to turn into a little bit of a frown. And what I mean by that is the direction of the bark, the way it wraps around the tree. So I'm taking a little bit of burnt sienna, maybe even a little bit of that brown, and I'm going to use a dry brush, right? So I'm blotting it. I'm going to paint with the side of the bristles, not the tip, the side. And I'm going to, in a very small sort of curve, very gentle, don't make it too extreme. I'm just going to start to dry brush back and forth a little bit of this this bark texture. Now I've picked up also a little bit of blue, so I'm going to change it up. I'm going to go sometimes a little more blue-gray and sometimes a little more brown. There's actually quite a lot of color in a birch tree, despite the fact that we kind of think of the bark as white. But I'm finding it a little bit tricky to get the paint off of my brush, but it's giving me a really nice soft effect. And so I'm going to err on the side of caution and go easy until I feel a little more confident here. But this dry brush means you have to work on dry, and your brush needs to be relatively dry as well. It can't be 100%, of course, but okay, so I'm going to pick up some more of the brown. And you'll notice I'm not going right straight from one side to the other as well. Sometimes I start on the left and I come across, and sometimes I start on the right and come in and go most of the way across, and that sort of thing. Now at this point of the tree, I'm guessing, since this is my horizon, at this point of the tree, I really need to start thinking about the direction. This is, of course, assuming that the tree is a straight tree. Basically, it's not leaning towards me or away from me. So, it can be leaning left or right and that sort of thing, and the same thing will apply with the arch. But if it's leaning towards me, it's going to be more of the smiles. But if I'm just looking straight at a tree, a normal tree, above the eye level or above your horizon line, that's where you can start thinking about changing it from this slight downward curve, from a smile to a frown. Get some of the blue. So not only does the shadow on the tree, including the core shadow, but the warm and cool, that adds to the dimension of the tree, and these bands, they're all contributing to the feeling of roundness that you want to get in your birch trees. And so this is really going to make such a huge difference when you're painting birches in order to make them look believable. And really, it's not a tremendous amount of work. You just get that first wash down, keep one side light. That was way too wet, obviously, so I'm going to blot that off. And I will just work somewhere else. And I think I need a drier paper towel. I'll wait till that little area dries a bit and I can... Okay, I'm going to start getting straighter across here. Now it starts to curve in the other direction. So and these little bands actually tell the viewer a lot about what is going on with this tree. Whether it's leaning forward or it's leaning backwards. So we'll see how I do for time, but if I have time, I'll do another one and I'll show you what it would look like if the tree were leaning forward or away. keep these curves subtle. If you make them too rounded, it kind of looks like when you're looking through a fisheye lens and everything's a little bit too exaggerated. So, you know, these are subtle things. I'm just pointing them out so that you can create a little more dimension in your paintings. Okay, so I'm going to come back and I'm going to do more. There's a surprising amount of texture and color in birches. More than you think. You know, we kind of, our heads say, well, it's a white, and relative to the other trees, it is white, but it's really not that white most of the time, especially if you're looking at the shadow side. So, in. Sometimes start at the left as well. Sometimes start in the highlight. All right, so now I'm going to start thinking, okay, well, I'm going to go even darker with some of these details. And I don't want to do the full bands. I want to start thinking in terms of the markings on the tree. So again, I'm going to do some dry brushing, but I'm not going to do the whole band across. I can occasionally, but most of the time it's just going to be marks. And okay, so just kind of like little bits and pieces all over the place, like little. I can even use more the point of my brush, but I want those broken edges, and by broken edges, I mean, instead of I get an edge that skips over the paper and leaves little pinholes, as opposed to, not even getting it, you know, instead of that sort of thing, right? So this is a smooth, wetter wash. This is dry, and it's skipping over the paper. And the paper is actually what's giving us the texture. So got my brush kind of wet there, so I have to blot it off. Right, so do be careful that you don't evenly space everything. I'm sort of catching myself making sure I don't do that. If you find yourself making too many evenly spaced things, then cluster some stuff. And what I mean by that is, you know, find a spot and put a few more extra bits in there. Maybe down here I'll put in a little bit more. Put an occasional band across, but not all the way, and not too much of that. All right, so one tree's got pretty good texture and everything going on now, and I'm just going to go to the other tree and do the same. This is the sort of thing, if you're into hand making cards and things like that, you can actually be working on a couple of these at the same time, because while you're waiting for one thing to dry, you could be working on the other. And you know, you just reposition the birch trees or the hill or anything like that, and you can do some pretty cool stuff with that. So these little markings are almost like little dashes in a lot of cases. So they're going to follow that curve that you've already established. Don't just dot them on with the tip of your brush like polka dots. They will follow that curve. Now, I have a big birch tree at my house, and I find that the branches, some of the lower branches will have the same sort of birch bark, but the further up the tree you go, and any of the new growth tends to be quite dark. So it doesn't establish this papery bark, you know, until the tree gets a little bit older. Good morning, Diane. Hi, Verna. So I'm going to go with a little bit of this burnt sienna, Payne's gray mixture here. I'm going to make it a little bit brown, and I'm going to put, you know, just going to put a few branches that are coming out here. Let's maybe make this one come out to here. And maybe attach that behind the other side of the tree, so I'll stop there. All right, so I've got a few branches on the tree, and I want to and doing those in a little bit more warmth to kind of coordinate with what I've got in the background here. But I want to put in a few, maybe darken some of this a little bit, but I want to put in a few more grasses and things like that, which will probably be more brown. So I'll go more burnt sienna with this. All right, so I'm going to put, I'm kind of flatten my brush. You see that? I flattened it out. And I can use the chisel edge and give myself some nice grasses here. Let's get a little more color. Usually some sort of twiggy stuff here. And I'll put that, maybe make that come down a little more in front. Indicate a couple of little, I don't know, little dried up branches, dried up leaves or pods of or something there. I'm just trying to get a little balance into this with the brown tones. But of course, if I have something sticking out of the snow, that little thing needs a shadow too. So these need to have shadows. And I think I can even take a little bit of brown, or the burnt sienna, I should say. I'm calling it brown, but burnt sienna. And if I dry brush just a little bit more of this, just plain burnt sienna, that'll warm up parts of the tree as well. See, that extra warmth in there is quite nice, isn't it? Okay, so I think I'm done with this one, and it's pretty quick. I actually got a whole little card done in that amount of time. That was you know, just over half an hour. If I weren't talking through it, I probably could have done it very quickly. But all right, so I'm going to try another one where I have a tree kind of leaning towards us instead. Okay, so Maybe I'll do this one horizontal. I'll do this one horizontal. Okay, so I'm going to have a tree that's sort of falling down, and so it's coming towards us. All right, so and maybe it's got a big branch that comes like this or something as well. You know, sometimes they have one bigger branch. And I'll put another tree right here. And, you know, maybe a creek or something here, right? So this, sometimes it's going to be sort of falling over towards the water. All right, so there's my imaginary tree, and I'm going to do the same sort of thing. Now, if I've got a light source from above, my shadow side is going to be on the bottom, of course. So this time, I'm going to put my shadow on the underside of the tree. With a core shadow in the middle. Because there would be light bouncing back from the snow. Now, I went a little bit shy on that, so I'm going to go a little darker with my blue. Felt like it was so dark when I did it at the beginning, right? Like when I did the first one. But it's surprising when it dries. It's like, oh, that wasn't so much after all. All right, so I'm going to have blue on this side. Put the core shadow in with a little darker, more warm tone. And I need to come back and soften these edges. I might not have been fast enough. I won't worry about the small branch here because it's a little too tiny to be concerned about. Okay, but I need to soften this edge. Getting that core part of the tree, you know, reasonably dark. Not as shy as I was with the first one. All right, so can't work on the birch tree right now, so let's find somewhere else to work. So I'm going to go into the creek area here, which is going to be fairly dark. So I'm going to use some Payne's gray, some cobalt. And I'm just painting the whole thing in, and then I will lift out a reflection of the tree, because I want the reflection of the tree to be a little blurry. There's that darn Arches logo, which is hopefully not going to mess up my little painting. All right, so I want to put some darks in here. I'm going to put in some of this darker mixture here, and I'm going to go a little darker in some places, especially along the bottom here. really dark in the water. I'm going to rinse my brush and blot it and try to imagine where this reflection would be. So I'm going to put it right about here. And I've just blotted my brush, and now I'm drinking up the extra color in that spot to show just the suggestion of that shadow. I want to put a little suggestion of the shadow in of the snow as well. So I'm going to go right along here and lift out a bit. $64. Oh, thanks. Sorry. I think we were covered in frost this morning. You got back from Studio 6. Oh my goodness. I didn't think that are they still doing warehouse pickup? Wasn't sure if they were doing that. Thought they just delivered now. Okay, so I'm lifting out the mounds of snow by the water here. Just using my brush, and when I lift out, I'm not scrubbing out, and that's, I think, important to clarify, is that I'm not using a stiff brush, and I'm not scrubbing back and forth and back and forth. I'm just using a little dampness in my brush and lifting out and wiping it on my paper towel. I'm not being aggressive with it. I don't want to start tearing up my paper and making roughed up paper here. So I want to be very gentle with my watercolor paper. All right, so just lifting out along the shore here, and you could see that kind of looks like a reflection. For a card, that's fine. All right. So I'm going to go back to my cobalt blue here, and maybe even a little cerulean. And I'm going to start creating some of the shadows in the snow. So I'm going to go right along here, like this, and maybe right along the water. In fact, along the water would have some shadow too. So I'm just going to put a little bit here, which will continue over here. There we go. So I've got a little area there of shadow in the snow, and I'm going to soften the top edge. When I soften the top edge, you notice I'm coming from above to soften the top edge, that I'm not doing it this way. Because I want the bristles of my brush, I want to lay down in front of where I want the paint to move. All right. So this needs to have a little bit of shadow as well. So get a little more in there. And it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, because the snow will kind of be lumpy over, I don't know, dead branches and piles of leaves and all kinds of things. Oh, oh dear. Hi, Brenda. All right, so coming along that top edge and softening. I want to make sure I don't leave that sliver of white along the water's edge either, because that would imply that there's actual light coming from the water, and there really isn't. So I want to come along here and make sure it gets dark enough right at the water's edge. Not as dark as the water, but dark, no slivers of white, in other words. All right. My softening's a little funny because of the arches embedding the logo there, but all right, so I can come in and put like little bits of extra things in the snow, and I'm going to put a strong shadow from the tree down to the water. Okay, so now I have a strong tree there, and so I'm not going to put a really distant background on this the way that I did this one. I think I might just put like woods back there. So just rather than having you know, a straight line there, I'm just going to come in and put this brown mixture here. I'm going to put browns. I want to mix it up sometimes. Sometimes I want to go a little more of the burnt sienna. Sometimes I want to go a little bit more Payne's gray or blue. So I'm going to come down and imply that there are other branches and trees that are coming forward. So I don't want to have a straight line back there, in other words. All right, so I've got that little section done there, but I want to put in a bunch of lines and things just because I want to have kind of a blurry but suggested that there's trees back there kind of look. I'm going to wait for this to get just to that tacky stage, just when the shine starts to come off of the paper, and I'm going to do a little scraping here. It might be too soon, but I'll find out. See, that's going to fill in and give me a dark line, but that's okay. I need dark ones too. I can even pull the other direction. That's not wet enough, but I'll show you in the next one. So I can come in underneath this branch now. So I'm negative painting around this tree. I want to make sure I get like lots of interesting darks back here, because that's really going to make the sun on this this birch really pop. Let's see. I'm going to get some darks in there. Since I have it on my brush anyway, I'm going to get some extra darks in there. So I'm going to sort of fill in here. Might even paint around a branch on the birch tree here, just a broken branch or something. Just kind of inventing as I go along here, which usually I don't recommend, but okay, so I've got a section here that's right between the trees, and just kind of filling it in. Make sure that paint's nice and juicy and runny. Okay. I came right down there. I should have not come right down there, but since I did, I need to come down here as well. All right, I need to imply that the forest is closer, so I need to come down a little closer. There we go, and scrape into some of this. Get some birchy looking stuff in the back, or at least lighter trees. Just kind of a bunch of noise basically in this background without actually painting individual trees. That's what I'm after here. All right, and last section. So I'm leaving the bottom of that very sort of jagged, because that implies the tree trunks or the tree stems and things, little saplings and other tree trunks and stuff. There we go. I'm going to go a little more burnt sienna in a couple of places. And I'm going to scrape into this. First scrapes when the paper's nice and wet, like this section is nice and wet. These first ones are going to be quite dark. And then I'll scrape into it when it gets to that sort of tacky stage, and then, you know, when the paint starts to get a little sticky, semi-dry stage, I can scrape away. Not yet. It's not ready yet. Getting close here. Okay. There we go. So it suggests a lot of trees back there without really going into a lot of individual tree painting and that sort of thing. So just like I did before, I'm going to take my blues and I'm going to start creating shadows. Make kind of long shadows here. And I'm trying to paint not through the trees. Like, you know, if I have a shadow here that's coming along, I want to stop at the tree, paint around it, and then a lot of this is just going to get filled in because it's, you know, dense forest. There we go. Okay, so I've got my tree that's falling into the creek, and if I want that tree to look like it's coming a little bit towards me, this is where the eye level thing isn't that crucial anymore because it's coming towards me. So the bands, it's kind of like looking below my eye level. They're all going to be a little mix here of both colors, blot. And I'm going to make this maybe just a little more curved because it is coming towards me. But I can do it lightly to start, and then I can make it darker as I get more confident. And painting with the side of the bristles. So this part here, I could really make this sort of have a change of direction in it. Let's make this a real change of direction. So I'm going to suddenly turn the other way, right? So you get the feeling that there's like an elbow there and it's going off in another direction. I'm going to put this is going to have to be really small on this branch here, but I really want to make, if I can, it's very small, but I have to still try and get that curve if I can. Now this tree, maybe it's not leaning as towards us as much, and so I'm not going to put as much of a curve in this one. This dry brush, by the way, is probably something you'll want to practice a little bit. It does take a little getting used to, and the paper that you use should have some texture on it. If it's too smooth of a paper, you won't get much texture. All right, so this one I'm going to put this one more straight across because I don't want this tree looking like it's coming towards me as much. So this one's going to be a little bit more sort of eye level kind of thing. And then it's going to have that sort of curving or like round frown kind of deal. There we go. All right, so I can start getting a little braver, a little bit of Payne's Gray and that new Payne's Gray and burnt sienna, and I can add even more darks. Now, some of that's not quite dry enough. I may have to wait a bit. And so we're getting pretty textured now, and establishing the the curve of the branches or the tree trunk, but they don't look flat. And that's the main thing I really wanted to get across today, is that I start off with the form of the tree, the cylindrical shape, then I put the texture on. Then I put the detail on. So I'm going to go now to the Payne's Gray, maybe a little burnt sienna added into it, and I'm going to start adding some of these final details on my birch tree. If it's dry enough, I hope it is. I don't know, might still be a little bit wet, but I won't wait. And oh, thank you very much, David. Somebody once said to me that if you want to sell paintings, paint birch trees. And I guess, I don't know if it's just Canada or North America, but we sure have a love affair with birch trees. But they said, paint birch trees and you will sell paintings. And I have, to date, found that to be true. We just love them. Okay, kind of straight across on this one. It's got a different curve. It's going in a different direction, so it doesn't have that same curve that this one has. This one's going to have that frown, that slight arch upward. Okay, and maybe a few little twigs and branches here too. Just a little, don't overdo that kind of thing, and don't make these too dark. Thin your paint a little bit, because that can really overpower and kind of be distracting. So I just want a little bit here. Blot these a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to darken this shadow a little bit more. Put a little more contrast where your center of interest is. So I've darkened it, now I'm softening it, like I've just blotted my brush to blend it into the rest of that shadow there. And there's my number 2 tree done. So that's my demo for today. I hope you enjoyed it. They are beautiful, Karen. Oh, the redwood trees. Oh, and I have a great tip for that too. I don't know if I've got time to show it. I'll show it really quick. So this is like your bonus demo here, okay? So when you're doing winter trees and you've got a tree that's not a birch tree and it got a lot of like bark texture in it, like a pine tree, for example, would have a really strong bark texture. There's both my birch trees, and I'm going to paint a good strong dark, so I'll use that same combination. Now you still want to create the roundness of the tree, right? So I'm going to come in here and paint a tree trunk, let's say a tree trunk here. And I want to go extra dark in the middle, so I'm going to go a little bit of Payne's gray maybe. And you'll probably have a warm side and a cool side as well. So I'm going to make a warm side, a little more burnt sienna, maybe here, and maybe a little bit of blue on the other side. So same sort of thing, it's just that you don't have the white left over like you do on, that's a little bit too blue there, isn't it? You don't have the white as you do on the regular birch tree. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to crumple up some paper towel and just lightly mottle what I've done. But before it dries, I'm going to come in and start scribbling with this tool, right? And I do mean scribble, like just sort of like this. And what happens when your paint is really wet and you scribble like this, you end up, all the paint ends up filling in those little marks and giving you a great bark texture. So let me zoom in on this. It's sometimes a little hard to show on screen because it doesn't always show, but I'm going to put a little bit more warmth on this side of the tree. And you can see where I scraped into the tree there, that it actually has quite a bit of, like it goes quite dark, which is kind of typical of the, you know, some of the redwoods and things like that. Now, I just kind of re-wet all of that, and I can blot some of this off again and play with it as much as I feel I need to, but that's a really quick way to get that bark texture. So just, I will tell you though that, you know, once you've sort of scribbled on your paper, you damaged your paper, like, you know, you scored it, right? So there's no taking it off once you've done it. But it gives you a really great texture, and I did something similar to that on one of my other recent paintings, and it's the easiest way to get that, you know, as opposed to taking a brush and painting all of that in. It's easy just to scribble. So so that gives you a really great texture. And then, you know, if you wanted snow on it or something, you could either spatter it first with masking fluid, or you could use a little bit of white gouache on it to create some of the white. But you know, that's a fast and easy way to do a tree that's not a birch, and that's your kind of bonus for today. So there we go. Put some tree branches on there, and there you go. All right, thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate you coming. Every time you come, it keeps me coming back, so I do appreciate that. Let a friend know. The recording will be here, so you know you can share it and all that good stuff. Thanks so much. See you next Wednesday if I don't see you before. Thanks again. Bye, everybody.